Hi everyone, I was asked to do a demo video for BitBay and how to do smart contracts to work you guys through some pretty frequently asked questions. So there is one thing that a lot of people do, and that is when they want to exit the client, they end up hitting the red X button, but that actually sends BitBay to your system tray. If you can see down in the bottom right, so you should just, if you X out of it, you should just click and you can boot it back up. If you want to exit properly, you go to File and then Exit. There is a lot of programs that do that, especially programs that need to be running. This one needs to be running when you're doing smart contracts. So, obviously if you're not doing a smart contract, you don't have to be running it. Which would be the same, which is true for like, BitTorrent or other programs that behave the same way. I was thinking of adding a dialog box that asks if people want it to behave a certain way so that they can control that. Maybe you guys should give me some feedback on what you think. Okay. Here, when you navigate it, you'll see that there's different help boxes that will tell you how each of the different tabs work, as well as a detailed history panel and that type of thing. You're able to refresh the area here to when it's downloading from the blockchain. Also, I noticed that some of you guys asked about the IRC chat tab and that it's black coin right now, and I can change that a little bit later. It's just that the two different the Halo client and this client share the same script, so I've got to make a different one for each. So I'll be changing that. I'm thinking about switching to Tox later. It's really fast. I'm just trying to look at the security of it and make sure that it's also good. If you go to your Receive tab, you'll see here your BitMessage address. If it is not loaded, you have to do some check with support. If you wanted to add an email address, you can do that right down here. Email is usually the default. So if you were trying to send a contract, I do recommend encrypted email. It is more reliable. Not everybody needs the incredibly high security of BitMessage, but I leave both options for the ones that do. BitMessage does have some vulnerability to attacks, so it is possible that messages can be lost in the network. But the most recent update was still pretty solid, and I've decided to enable it for the people that want to try it. If no BitMessage address is showing, then you might have a problem with the install, and that you can check to see if bitmhalo.exe is running. libea32 on my computer works, and as many other computers works in this version, and for some reason there's a different version of this DLL which is a different size, and I've noticed that that works on other computers, so I don't really know why that is. If you wanted, you could install Microsoft Distributable 2008 and OpenSSL, and that should fix the problem. Just make sure that you get it for the right version of your computer if it's 32 or 64-bit. I was also asked to walk you guys through a setup. So when you do set up BitBay, when you run the installer, just go ahead and follow the instructions. Don't install it in program files because that requires elevated admin privileges, and I don't really know what exactly to do about that. I believe that that is why the data directory for any coin daemons like Blackcoin or whatever stores in your app data on Windows, so that it can run properly. We did notice on some systems you can't install the program files. I should also take a second to explain what BitMessage actually is and why it's significant. I use it to avoid blockchain bloat, so I don't store any of my contracts on the blockchain. Instead, I leverage other systems. So we could leverage, BitMessage, which is the only decentralized email service in the world. There isn't really any alternatives to BitMessage currently. Although there are some interesting things that I've thought about leveraging, such as TorChat or Tox. And that's kind of why I also use encrypted email as another option, because there are so many different email providers, and theoretically you would still be able to keep pretty private and have your IP run through Tor and still be able to use email services. So that's kind of a little bit of background on that. It's basically done so that contracts can scale into the millions, and we could have many people use contracts at the same time without causing a really heavy bloated blockchain. So let me walk you guys through your first contract. When you first get to the panel, you'll notice a few things. You'll notice that there is a box over to the right which has backing up of your contracts file, which is something that you have to do. When you do a contract, a key, your half of the contract is going to be saved in the contracts.dat file. That means that if somebody was to hack your computer, they couldn't actually take anything from the wallet, which is good, except if you lose your computer, or if you have, like, you know, a hard drive failure or something. And this really does happen. It's happened to me before. I've had hard drives fail. So what you need to do is use like a USB or flash drive or something, and use that as your backup path, or you could just use another backup path on your computer, which is also fine. But that's really important, especially when you're in negotiations. Then there's also the instant refund. That's more of an anti-malleability feature for coins that don't have check lock time verify. The only time I really recommend an instant refund is for very high security deals. So it's up to you guys if you want to experiment with it. Now you can pay, this is one question that I get a lot, and that's you can pay a BitBay address, or, you know, if it was Halo, a Bitcoin or Blackcoin address, you can pay those addresses directly, and that's how the spam filter works. You basically make an encrypted message, and that bypasses the spam filter and does a handshake request with the other party. So that's more for anti-spam. It's also just another way to send a contract. However, when it happens, it's going to fall back on whatever options you have checked off. So if you've checked email, then and there is an email address loaded, it'll use it. If you've checked BitMessage and that's loaded, then it'll try to negotiate the contract with BitMessage. So keep that in mind. If you try to send a contract to somebody, it will default to email. So that's another thing to consider. And if your email isn't loaded, I just changed it so that it'll just go to BitMessage instead. So you put the address in, and then you put the deposits, and you just make sure that they're even, and then you go ahead and you send the contract. So there's one little trick that I want you guys to know about, and that's that you can actually download, install, and open BitMessage yourself and kind of track the progress of your message. Some computers might be pretty slow, and BitMessage has a pretty high proof of work right now. So my i7 still takes a few seconds to send a message, and I've seen even slower computers take several minutes. If you attach an image, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that can take up to 15 minutes, and that's on my 8 processor i7. So I have a pretty fast computer, and it still takes some time. So what you could do is, if you're not getting a message, if they're not getting a message, or something funny is going on, then you can go ahead and you can look and see the status of the message that you sent in BitMessage. There is always the possibility of adding a way to check the status of the message in the client later. So after you're finished sending the offer, basically they'll get it. They can choose to accept or counter offer, just changing the terms. And finally, then you'll see the order going to broadcasting. So first it'll make the transactions. There's about 3 transactions that need to be done between the two parties, and they have to sign them and agree on everything. Plus, this is true smart contracts, so they're agreeing on stuff in advance, such as the destruction transaction and the timeout, whereas any other way that is attempted to be to hack through it, and that's just not the correct protocol. So this is a true smart contract. It'll negotiate everything. It'll go into escrow finally once they've agreed, and that's the whole process here. It is possible to cancel, although I recommend that you don't. Canceling the broadcast can mean you'd have to send from your main account, which would just be, cost you another fee, and there's just really no point to that. Finally, when you get into escrow, that's the exciting part, you'll see that there's notifications throughout the client. So whenever anything happens, notification will pop up and tell you, and it'll take you to that tab and you click on it, which was one of my attempts to make the client a little bit more user-friendly. When you get in, you'll notice there's a few different options that I have now. I'm definitely interested in adding more later, especially for cash deals where you're just buying cash for coins. This is like one of those deals where you wouldn't really want to communicate too much with the counterparty, especially if you're sending something like a money wire or a Western Union. So you just give them the money and then they give you the coins. So in this case, we have the option to send a Western Union number, which I think is kind of nice, but it could just be a confirmation number of any kind. We also have the ability to ask for extension requests, so we can ask for more time as long as the other party agrees to it. So when they're both on the same page, they agree, they just automatically extend the time of the escrow, which is pretty useful for any delays. If you are satisfied with the contract and you and the other party agree, then you can simply send a confirmation request, and what will happen is they'll get that request and their client will start to broadcast the transaction, and when it is complete, it'll automatically clear itself. One thing to consider when it does that, don't click, like when you send the confirmation request, there really is no need to send it again, unless the other party never gets it for like days, so there's no need to click on the panel, open up the escrow, or send it again. Also, it should be said that when you send them, it's permanent. So when you say you want to complete, you really can't take the decision back because they have that signature. That's what happens. So after you're done, the details will show up in the more detailed history panel, and it'll show you basically the transaction ID of the escrow itself and whatever details there were. I actually do filter images from this because I don't think it's necessary to store so many images. And one more thing about that, I'll walk you guys through attaching an image if you do decide to do that. If you send it through email, obviously there's no proof of work, so we still compress the images, and I'm proud to say that we can compress an image that is quite big to a size that is quite small, and that's done to basically reduce the burden on BitMessage because it is decentralized email. There's no server, so you're putting quite a stress on the rest of the nodes when you try to send messages because they have to sift through thousands and thousands of different of other people's messages that aren't for them. So this will bring the size of the message automatically down, and even then I've noticed the proof of work can still be, like I said, up to 15 minutes. So if you want to send messages, probably just do it through email, or even attach some links, because really we're limiting it to one, but if you wanted to do a bunch, you could just put links in your description. Thank you very much for watching my video, and I hope you have a nice day.